names because we have a small group, so feel free to ask me questions between my slides or even interrupt me if you have anything to ask. I'm good. I can stop twice. So you're a Castas, okay. Well, I'm on Destas, okay, sorry.
I'm autoras, Beros, Bontas, Justus, Carpas, Eitlus, Mendoza.
Nice. Nice to meet you. It's quite pleasant to be here with such young people who are just beginning their development journey and just beginning to learn everything what the development itself is made of. So I believe we had a lot of lectures before, and you will have some more who will teach you how to write your code in a certain way or to be with the industry's most cutting-edge technologies. But today I'm going to talk more about soft skills, which aren't that elaborated between developers, but they are really important between our community, and this might affect your career later. So just gave you a sneak peek about what I'm gonna talk. Are we ready? Can we start? Rolling yet? Okay, cool. So, hey, my name is Pijus, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of a new startup called Reneza. We based in UK, and basically what we do is try to invent current situation in UK's property management, and we're trying to give new tools for property managers to manage their assets. As you all know, property is the most valuable thing that you can buy in your lifetime, and mostly people who buy property and let them to other people want to be able to see how it's being taken care of, and want to know what kind of tenants are going to stay in it. Also, the industry itself is really lagging from technology perspective, because before 2016, I guess, there wasn't much inventions in this industry, because everything what was created was done before 90s. So the agents currently use Excel or other arbitrary tools to make their daily basis tasks and to communicate with tenants or with leads they are getting from all sorts, like Zoopla, Rightmove. For instance, in Lithuania, alternative for them would be Arvodas.lt or something like that. So yeah, this is what we're doing. We're creating software for property managers and trying to help them with their daily tasks from developers' point of view. We're basically cloud software who tries to automate some tasks, for instance, contract signing or contract creation in general, because we do fulfill information inside contracts automatically, we do payments automatically, and a lot of things that are kind of a hassle for property managers and take a lot of their time. So yeah, that's what we do. So before we started, we were B2C, which means business to customer startup, and we had 3 major shifts. So as you can see, there is a comic about shifting and pivoting in startups. Most of the time we find ourselves in some sort of Frankenstein code base, which has to be refactored in one way or another. So we have been shifting until we found our market fit and closed contracts with our clients. And today I'm going to share you my story, and everything I'm going to tell you is it's coming from my experience in this or other startups I have been before. So that's pretty much what I want to tell you guys. Feel free to interrupt me, as I told you before. Don't be shy, because there's nothing more important than give you the message I want to send you, because the main thing you're coming in this industry where developers are valued really high, and most of you guys will be valued not only by your knowledge but also by your soft skills. So yeah, programming is not the same everywhere. So let's take an example. This is just a comic about different languages, different programming languages. So if you want, just read it. I'm not gonna take much attention on them. So speaking about programming and bugs, basically from time to time you get some bugs from your sales team or from your Q&A team, and you have to deal with them. But you have to deal with them in different ways, considering where you are developing, because in web development, which I know by heart, front end and back end are separated. Also, there are DevOps system administrators. So consider a situation where you have a bug in front end. What you're going to do? You are going to fix the bug, write some tests, test your code, and deploy. And then within the minutes, your client will be happy because you just fixed the bug. Consider the same situation in backend. What if you have a bug in backend where something was calculated incorrectly and saved to that case? What do you have to do? Can you just fix the code, test it, and deploy? What do you have to do?
Fix the database entry.
Yeah, how do you do that? Manually and painfully. What if you have 1,000 entries per minute? So you still do it manually. So what do you do then?
Try to automate it.
What?
Try to automate it.
Yeah, that's correct. You have to automate it. Do you have any ideas? So you see, most of the time you have built some applications which didn't last long or weren't supposed to be in production. But in production, there are some situations where you have to adjust your code or adjust your logic between what you have to do. For instance, like you have a bug in the database layer, how you're supposed to fix it if the users are using your system 24/7. You can take an approach which our banks are taking, and that shut down everything with unhappy customers and users unable to use your service. Or you can take another approach and try to automate it. So there are two kinds of migrations, and one of them is to write migration pattern inside your application. For instance, you try to create a separate entry for the users who are using the old data until the data is migrated by a script, and those users who have been migrated from the old data are using your new platform with your new entries. So at the same time, no one is unhappy. Those users who haven't got an update are still waiting in queue, and the script can do its work automatically. Does it make sense? Or is it just a bunch of nonsense? Yeah, let's boil down it to a simple example. For instance, you are building some kind of program which tries to calculate an equation which is F equals MA. That makes sense, yeah? And we did the same mistake in front end. We just fixed the calculation, but it's not okay for all users who have been using your front end before. So what do you do now? You have to do some sort of migration. When you do the migration, you can do it automatically without any logic inside the application. But this is not only the function, but how the data is being saved. For instance, you haven't saved the outcome of your equation, but you have saved your parameters. And now you need to save only the outcome of the equation. How do you do it now?
So since you have the parameters, you can just run the equation, you put the parameters.
Yeah.
And you have the outcome.
So you have to somehow calculate the outcome, but at the same time the users are using your platform. What do you do now? What if you're calculating the outcome while the user is trying to access data? What do you do?
Maybe build a backup server for these kind of things.
So yeah, one approach is to log the user. Other approach is to give them the old data until the data is updated. So as I mentioned before, there are multiple situations, and I believe you will deal with them. I won't go too deep, but just so you know, there are different outcomes in different environments. And let's take the same example and calculate equation, for instance, in the hardware environment. Let's assume that you're building a satellite and you used the wrong equation. What is the outcome when you have to update, test, and deploy your code?
Well, it's going to crash.
Yeah, exactly. So the key message I want to send you with this set of slides is that depending on the environment, expectations are different, and your code has to be more resilient, or it has to be more flexible. In case you are in a startup, you want to be flexible. In case you are developing something in medical tech or in hardware, you want to be more precise and want to make sure that your software is going to last and won't make a lot of mistakes. So does that make sense? Cool. So just a fun fact, even Google knows that software has bugs. and software isn't always correct. So when they have designed their Chromecast, they included an extra button which, while pressed, will reset and flash ROM on top of it from ground zero and just make the device to lose all data and make automatic factory reset. So basically, this is their backup, and the message from this fact is that it's hard to build long-lasting software, and you have to make some design choices where if you want your users to be satisfied, you have to give them options to go back to the ground zero. And all principles I've talked before replicate actually when you want to add a new feature. For instance, suddenly your partner has changed their API and data layout and have a lot of data which has to be changed again, or you have to change the API and migrate somehow your old users from the old API to the new API, which happened with Stripe. If you have do you have an experience with payments or something like that? Okay, so you didn't do any development in payments. That's fine. That's all good. Just what I wanted to tell you guys that every third party you are going to use can change in any time, and you have to adjust your code, and you have to make some sort of assertions that your code won't run as it's run before. And that's the key message. Why you are seeing Ethereum logo over here is that I wanted to tell you that Ethereum was running on Solidity smart contracts. Actually, those contracts were running on Ethereum network. And in the long run, Ethereum developers have realized that Solidity was in a way a mistake, because it is quite similar to JavaScript, and JavaScript developers started to write smart contracts, which introduced a bad behavior, which is that they were used to write code in a rapid development way, where they could update the code quite often, and if the bug caused some outage or if the bug caused something goes wrong, you just fix it, deploy it, and that's it. But when you go to the blockchain environment, everything is persistent. So basically, if you write the same contract, which is now persistent, then you just publish it, and if it has a bug, what do you do now? You can't do anything. So between the developers, there are some comments saying that hardware developers would do a better job in blockchain than, for instance, front-end developers, just because they're used to working in such environment where your code has to last at least 10 years instead of 10 minutes or instead of hours. So before you start to work as a developer, think, what do you like the most? Because there are some key questions you can ask yourself and discover what kind of environment is acceptable for you, what kind of responsibilities you can cope with, because sometimes developers just burn out just because there is huge pressure on them to make the code work correctly. And imagine that if you're writing software for Meta or something like that, and and people depend on your software, and you're one button kill a human being, this is a huge mental pressure, I guess, and you have to consider whether or not you want to work in such environment and whether or not it's acceptable for you. Because, as I mentioned before, it can just burn out. I have seen a lot of developers burning out because of pressure. I have seen a lot of developers burning out because of stress. Stress is usually common between startups because funding is limited, and usually management puts a lot of pressure to release features which aren't finished, but you have to do it. Also, it's common between enterprises. As you know, Google launches their products unfinished just because their managers want to get a rise. So it's quite a huge thing to think of, because you will have to deal with it. You will have to discover what is acceptable for you and where do you want to work.
Question, how do you recommend to deal with burnout and that kind of stuff?
Well, actually, it really depends on your team. First of all, you have to inform your lead or your manager, because if they don't know that you're burning out, they might think that you're just not giving them enough, and they might pressure you more, which will lead to more burnout, and you just will fall out of the company. Secondly, you have to take some time for yourself, I guess, because maybe you just aren't resting well. You have to try to understand what you're doing wrong and what actions have led you to burnout, because it's a really huge topic between developers, even experienced developers, because there are a lot of developers who have been overpressured and burned out quite quickly and didn't want to code. Actually, I know one lecturer who told me that he quitted his job just because he burned out so much. He didn't wanted to write any code, but he's teaching other people to write code. So this is an issue, and you have to know it. Take care of you. Have any questions more?
For now, no.
Okay. So code maintainability. And yeah, those guys are stupid, because you just wrote a performant code or just one-liner which performs better than anyone's code in your team. Does that make sense? No, not really. I'm just teasing you guys. Don't fall asleep. So take a look on these two functions. They basically do the same thing. They are quite simple. Which function would you choose?
First one,
Why?
simple,
More
easy to read.
Yeah, sure. Why would you choose the second one?
It's faster, but not as nice.
Yeah, it's faster. You know it. You have encountered byte shift. You can shift bytes because numbers are saved in two bases. When you shift one bit in the byte, you just automatically multiply the number by 2. So it's faster. There are some cases you would want to use the second one. For instance, you're doing some hardware development where performance and power is a huge deal. But most of the time, you should choose the first one because it's readable and it's easier to maintain. Developers often make a huge mistake and try to over-optimize their code beforehand, which will lead your team into devastation, because if a developer can't comprehend code after reading it 3 times, there's something wrong with the code, not with you. And even if you are a junior, you should understand code in one way or another what it's doing by just reading it. If you can do that, most likely it's something wrong in the design or how it's being done. Secondly, one of the quotes down at the front. He wants that premature optimization is the root of all evil. Have you heard this quote before? No. So I guess you will heard between different projects, or you were heard in your career later. But this is a thing because developers tend to optimize code just because they love complexity and they love to deal with numbers, or they love to make their code performant, but it's inherently bad to make code performant beforehand, because when you have a situation when you're the only one who knows how the code is working, you're going to be the only one who's going to fix it. And the team will depend on you. And you will grow your code base in such a way that it's going to be unmaintainable. And what if you're going to change companies? Or what if you are leaving the job? So your teammates are stuck with your code, which isn't comprehensible. And that's the key message I want to tell you guys. Businesses usually choose readable code over performance because it's cheaper for them to add more server power instead of waste time on you, because the development cost is the biggest cost they're paying, and the servers are just an OpEx, which is basically one developer's wage, or what you consider it, or two developers. It depends on your scale, but what I'm trying to tell you is that the time you're going to spend while fixing the code, which you don't understand, it will cost the business more than the server, which gonna use more power to execute your code, which isn't performant. Does that make sense? Yeah. So definitely, sadly, but definitely, you're going to deal with tech debt. Have you heard about it?
Yes.
Have you dealt with it?
Well, perhaps yes, but when I had dealt with it, I didn't notice it was a tech debt.
Okay, but you know it now.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So most of the time, tech debt is caused because of lack of time, or because your manager is trying to push you to release features earlier than you want to, and earlier than you need to. And this might lead to some situations where you take a hack and just release it just because you want to please your manager, or you want to get your code on a timely manner. So secondly, you can get some technical debt just because the code stack is getting old. For instance, you heard about COBOL? It's a language.
Yeah.
Do you know where it's used?
In various old systems, like banks and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, even our local banks use COBOL in their backbone, which is language created 61 years before. And believe me, it's not that beautiful. And it doesn't have that great tooling that C# has, or Node.js, or whatever environment you used to. So tech debt might come from stack getting old, but banks make banks do not upgrade their stack just because there is a huge risk on losing customers' data. So they're trying to keep the stack working, and they're trying to build logic on top of that. But the base layer is still written in COBOL. Does that make sense? So again, it's technical debt, and we have to deal with it. Actually, me and my team had some technical debt in that base layer, which was because our database providers has upgraded their API and they introduced breaking changes. This is not quite often, but it happens. And breaking changes usually means that you're behind something and you have to upgrade, but it has a cost to do the upgrade, and you have to write some more code and take time. And your management might not understand what you're doing, because actually it doesn't bring anything new. It just makes your code look better or be more on the edge. So that's it. Okay, so speaking about growing projects, in 90s it used to be a huge pile of mud. You had huge projects where you just added codes, copied library codes inside your project code base. Most of the time you had same function in 7 different places, written in different ways with some small details, and the code wasn't maintained. And this came from the fact that there weren't much guides on how to write maintainable and readable code. Most of the time, developers at that time used to think about how to make the code work instead of how to make the code correct, resilient, manageable, maintainable, and etc. Later came the layered stack. I believe you have heard about MVC. Yeah. Most of you heard. Is there anyone who didn't? Okay, cool. So MVC is one of the examples about a layered stack where you separate your database logic from your controllers or your views, and in one way or another you're letting your application communicate in layers and separating your code and making it more maintainable and not so tightly coupled. But yeah, we faced some issues again with layered architecture because it scales well until a certain point. For instance, in Reneza, we started from monolith because it is cheaper, and at that point it made sense. Microservice architectures are expensive, and they introduce a lot of complexity in your code base. They aren't silver proof. They are silver bullets, and they aren't always the best solution for a stack or your project. Have you heard about microservices? Yeah, there is a huge buzz about them. So we haven't had them, but we were growing, and our project was growing in a rapid way, and we were adding a lot of features. Suddenly we realized that we were going to release not only one product, but multiple products who will depend on the same code base, which will become unmaintainable. Therefore, we broke our monolith into microservices, which now are used multiple times in different projects. And for instance, I can tell you some of them. One microservice is used to handle all user authentication and nothing else. Another microservice is used to handle everything with time, which means that it has a ticking plot inside it, and it calls other microservices with payloads, which reminds them that they have to do some work. Just for interest, it's done with Kafka, the communication assessment problems. If you have heard about it, if you haven't, you will, I guess. So yeah, that's it about that's it about different architectures. Have you heard about anything, any other architecture except these ones?
I've heard about MVVM, but maybe it's going to it's nested inside one of these.
Actually, I don't know it. But it might be that I don't know architecture. I have heard about SOA, centrifuge, and other different architectures which are emerging or have been emerging in the past. So, speaking about your code, companies usually find themselves in a situation where the code becomes unreadable. And when you try to add some feature, you suddenly break the best side of code. And when you try to fix the west side of code, north side throws an error, and you try to find the guy who wrote the north side of code, but the guy is on vacation, therefore you can't do your work. So there's a huge lag in development, and your managers aren't happy. The company is stopping its development, and you have to take an action upon it. And actually, it's on you to make a call when you have to refactor or when you have to, in some sort of way, divide your project into separate modules or separate projects to make it work. Because no one knows better the code layout, no one knows better how it feels to code in that code base than you yourself. Therefore, you have to instruct your project managers or your teammates that something needs to be fixed. And I believe your companies will have some sort of mechanisms to get this information from you, but you will live with that code sometime. And the least one thing what you can do is just leave the code for something else, like this guy did.
Isn't that like a mean thing to do?
Well, actually, developers switch companies, which is quite usual, and it isn't a mean thing to do because you can't work these days for one company for 20 years. But it's good to work for at least 2 years because you're improving yourself and you get to know with different technologies, and you get to know with the team. And it might be that in a single year you just don't know enough to feel free to try new features and to feel free in the company. So I have a question for you. What do you think? When do you need a break? When do you need to break a file into separate files? When it reaches 100 lines, or when it reaches 1,000 lines, or when it reaches 10,000 lines? I have seen projects where files can extend to 10,000 lines or even 15,000 lines, which is quite hard to comprehend because usually screen fits around from 40 to 80 lines of code.
I think it's above 200 or 300. It's probably a good idea to consider splitting it into separate files.
Cool. What is the other opinion? Do you have any other opinions? Or does it?
I agree with that.
Okay, cool. And the last thing today, what I want to talk is psychology. it's gonna play a huge role in your career, I guess, because you will start as a junior and you will meet a lot of senior programmers or even mid programmers who know way more than you know right now. And this may cause an impostor syndrome. And later, when you grow, you can grow into overconfidence and back and forth from overconfidence, imposter syndrome, and these ones really stop your self-development because do you know what is imposter syndrome?
So do you feel like you don't belong in the study in a place? Something?
You feel that you know less than others, you feel that you're dumb to be here, and it's quite common because seniors or even mids, they are used to do a lot of stuff in the code base, or they're used to deal with huge complexities, and they just solve the problem faster than you do, and this might, in some sort of way, damage your ego, which shouldn't be the case because you're just having to learn how to code. This mindset could damage your group because every one of us have started from ground zero and didn't know how to code. Every one of us didn't know what means const or what means integer. Every one of us didn't know what means circuit breaker pattern or something like that. And you can lose yourself in this mindset where you just blame yourself that you know too less, that this 15 years old kid knows way more than you do, that the other guy knows a lot and you don't know that. How the hell they know all this stuff and I don't know this, and you just blame yourself that you're too bad to do the job. And actually, it's not the case because as you are beginning your journey, you have to take a lot of questions from your mentors, from your teammates, and try to improve yourself as much as you can. Don't lose faith in yourself because no one will bring you back, and everyone will see you unhappy with your work instead of being happy and creating wonderful stuff. So just try to not let yourself to think that you know too less, because there are a lot of things that you have to know or even don't know when you're doing your job. You might do something really well, you might do something really bad. And speaking about overconfidence, this problem is common but not so common. Only a certain type of people face it, because when you do grow and when you grow fast, you start to think that you already know everything, everything is on plate. You start to shoot your ideas faster than seniors. You start to think that they are better than theirs. But actually what's happening is that you lose yourself in this kind of environment where you know your stuff, but you don't think how it's going to impact others, and you don't think how it's going to impact the code base. And most usually senior developers overthink everything they do. They overthink every idea you shoot. They overthink their self ideas, and they even ask you for challenges, and they ask whether or not their idea is correct just because they were themselves overconfident while they were developing.
I want to get back to the imposter syndrome. How should I tell a friend to snap out of if I notice that he has it and he's just afraid to go to a coding conference or something like that?
Actually, first of all, he has to acknowledge it, because if he doesn't, he won't take action upon it. He will just tell you that he doesn't want to go. I don't have the right mood. I don't want to do anything. I'm not a psychology specialist, but I have made some of my friends to come to the development world from this kind of issue. This issue is kind of widespread between people who are switching jobs because they don't feel so confident when they spend their last 50 years working, for instance, in finance, and just switch their jobs to programming because they found themselves more interested in doing some coding instead of doing some finance lines or something like that. And they encounter imposter syndrome just because their teammates are younger and they know more and they have more experience. Therefore, they are blocking themselves from questioning what they're interested in. What I mean, try to help your friend by speaking with him, whether or not he acknowledges the fact that he has it, or whether or not he knows that he feels shy to ask something that he doesn't know, and tell him that he can ask you whatever you want, or whatever he wants actually, and that it will actually help you to develop, because when he asks you something and you don't know, you will know it too. So it might help you and him, and maybe you will, in some sort of way, try to adjust himself and adjust his behavior. Does that make sense? I mean, it really depends on the person you're dealing with, because there are a lot of different people. Maybe he's an introvert, or maybe he's an extrovert who doesn't want to show everyone that he doesn't know something. So it really depends on from where it's coming, but it's a thing. You have to, in some sort of way, try to help them. Does that make sense? Have you encountered imposter syndrome yourselves? All the time. Yeah, so just acknowledge it. It's a normal thing. I have been through it, and I believe some of you will. But it's part of your development, and it's part of development itself in programmer world. So yeah, so the last thing I want to make a point on is teamwork. It is easier to work alone. It's always easier to work alone because you know every single code line you have wrote. You know everything you made. But only a few companies hire people who work solo, and usually they hire people who work in teams. Just because software is still built by humans. It isn't built by robots. It isn't built by solo developers. Software cannot build itself, and the main reason why you have to deal with people is because you can't build it alone. It's too huge for yourself. So you have to gather your team, make the project doable by communicating with everyone else, making framework which suits you and suits your team, because companies usually tend to limit their environments to use only Scrum or Kanban, but you have to actually ask the team whether or not they want to do it and how do they want to manage their work, because it's really a huge thing to have a good team. Actually, this is part of mine. In photo, you can see people freaking out because we had an outage. We were having it because a few reasons in the API, and one pattern wasn't implemented because it was a technical debt, because we were rushing. So everything I talked about before comes to the team and how you're going to handle every kind of situation, whether it is technical debt or whether it is impostor syndrome, and how you're gonna work in general. Yeah, that's it. Hope that helped you. Because I can see people who are not quite interested, but I can see people who are just keen on what I said. So I really hope that it will help you later, and it will help you in your journey. Do you have any questions?
You mentioned that you had a startup, right? Like the Horizon.
I'm still in it.
Yes. So, how much experience building did you have when starting a startup?
So yeah, actually, I started lecturing 15 years old. Before that, I learned programming from first class. After lecturing, I were into startups. Yet alone, one that dealt with smart properties. Basically, we were trying to make smart properties cheaper. The second startup dealt with 3D printers and some of the blockchain technologies. It was quite complex, but it made sense because we were trying to defend property rights of the print makers. Both of them died, as usually startups do. And the one I'm in is actually doing really well. I'm happy. Do you have any other questions?
I am interested in your slide style. Is it like a custom template you need or something?
Kind of. Actually, I'm using the Vue.js. You can take a look on it, and you can adjust it by CSS. It's quite a good tool if you know how to code. It's quite simple, and I really like it because it has more features. And also, I'm using Linux, therefore I'm not using PowerPoint. So yeah.
So one more question. When you're managing a startup, what do you spend most of your time on?
Well, it really depends on the day, because there are days when I go from meeting to meeting and barely get to lunch. There are days when I deal with the team and try to help them develop in Scrum methodology. Have you heard about it? Yeah, so there are days when myself, participate in retrospectives or stand-ups. Also, I have to deal with a lot of technical stuff, between our partners and us, because we have to, in some sort of way, have a common API or something like that, because where I'm working right now, there wasn't a lot of technology innovation for years, and most of the companies don't even have anything on public API. So they're not used to webhooks, they're not used to event processing. They were using their tools who were built by Adobe. How is that tool called? No, even older.
Flash?
I don't remember actually, but it's quite old. They are speaking in XML. Other partners such as Stripe or EverSign or Zero Deposit, for instance, who is also a UK startup who is doing in property industry, are quite on the cutting edge because their APIs are publicly published and you can even review them. They are amazing and we don't have any issues with them, so there isn't a lot of work with them actually because I can give my developers access and we can do the job. And then lastly, what I do on my free time, when I'm not hiring people or when I'm not in meetings, I do develop the code itself. The code base itself. I do a lot of work in backend development, and I did a lot of work and going from monolith to microservices. So yeah, actually I do code.
Yeah, that's what
That was actually why I gave you guys this kind of presentation because usually developers tend to talk only about tech stuff, but the soft stuff, the soft skills and your personal traits are not less important than your technical knowledge because they will form atmosphere around you, and as there is one saying that I know it only in Ukrainian. Does that make sense? So one little thing can break everything apart.
Yeah.
So if you're a toxic person, you can break the team apart. If you are unhappy with your work, you can spread that happiness in the company and etc. etc. So it really depends on you, how well you're doing your job, how well you're feeling in the company, how well your teammates are doing in the company. Yeah. So actually, I'm happy to see it over here. There is a huge movement in women's Go Tech, and I know people who are part of it. I'm really happy because mixed environment does a lot. Boys tend to talk shitty stuff. That makes sense. And in some sort of way, women think different because when I was lecturing, they really think differently in means of how they write code, and it's not worse or better, it's just different. They do algorithms differently. For instance, I can give you one question which only one woman have answered me correctly. What is the least amount of ifs you have to write to test whether or not one of the variables out of 3 are equal to 0? I can tell it again. What is the least amount of ifs you can write to tell whether or not one of the 3 variables are equal to 0? But parameters such as them or are considered another if. For instance, if you write one if, but you make 3 equations, it's going to be 3 equations.
I think in general, writing no ifs at all.
How come? How you are going to test whether or not your marbles are equal to 0?
We need to check whether one of 3 variables is equal to 0, right?
Yes.
We could do one, like, we could sum them or something. No. I guess 2 maybe.
We could.
So you are guessing that 2 is not.
Yeah.
We can multiply them all together and check if the.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, this shows me that you have, in some sort of way, good mathematical comprehension. That makes sense because you thought out of the box and you thought that, okay, I know that if you multiply something by 0, you will get 0. Therefore, I can test whatever value others have, and I can test only one equation. And if it's true, I know that one of them is going to be a 0. So, yeah. Do you have any other questions? Nice. Nice to meet you guys. Hope to see you soon. Hope you're going to do well and you will develop yourself in a way which you want to do. That's it.